Computer. Hello, everybody. It's Cascadia Composers. This is a presentation for May. We have Mark Pritchard uh, sharing his experience with Dorico over the last couple of years, going through the steps necessary to add custom plugins to your score and play examples that demonstrate the possibilities. So, thank you, Mark, for being here. And it's all for you, your show now. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Yeah, this is the second round of this presentation, the first one having happened last fall. So, are those present actually using Dorico? How many of you are actually using Dorico? Yeah? hmm
Me.
I've bought it, but I haven't really started using it in seriously yet.
And I haven't bought it yet. I don't know if I will.
Yeah, it's my main program.
hmm
Mine as well.
Yeah, well, I've definitely fallen in love with it over the couple years I've been using it so far, but I'm far from an expert on it yet. This program is so deep and so um, complex in a way, but it just takes a long time to get to know everything. And of course, you solve it one problem at a time as you compose something, and you have to figure out how to do that thing that you now need for this piece. So that's the way I've learned, is just by knowing what I want to compose next and then trying to solve all the problems around it. I have spent a fair amount of money, probably a couple $1,000s on sound libraries, and um, I have several different possibilities for plugins that I can use. The primary one that I use is Contact by Native Instruments, and that's a very commonly used in film and video and all over the place. And Native Instruments has a huge array of synthetic instruments and sampled instruments available in packages that you can buy. And then I've also bought a couple of other libraries for specialized purposes. It's amazing what's out there. So, um, and then on the simpler side of things, there is NotePerformer, of course, which maybe some of you are familiar with because it also works with Finale and Dorico. With Finale and Sibelius. And I'm also using it with Dorico. So for simple scores that I do, that's just the simplest plugin in the world. You just um, set a playback template for it. Once you've installed it, um, it creates its own playback template, and that's super easy to apply. So let's see. In general terms, there's some very basic terminology that we went over the first time, and sound library is, like I said, you can purchase, or sometimes there is a sound library, a basic one that comes with Dorico. So there are presets, a playback template for that will work quite well when you just open up a score, and it'll assign its own instruments and so forth. It's not really the best, but it's a sort of a basic enough to hear what you're composing and get by with it, and not really something I would use to produce something I want publicly heard. But yeah, so you have a sound library to draw on, and then you have a plug-in that brings that sound library into your score, and you have in Dorico a playback template, it's called. Now I guess I'm going to illustrate some of these things with my recent composition Rainy Day, which was just heard in the concert last Friday. And to do this realization of the score, this playback realization, I had to go through quite a few different sound libraries to try to pick the best percussion instrument for that particular purpose. And so I have done that here. And I don't really have so a playback template maybe is better demonstrated in one of my simpler scores, and I think I'll maybe demonstrate that first. A playback template is just something that applies a particular library and plug-in. So let me open, I guess I might as well open this one. This is what I'm working on right now. And it's just a bare bones start with some things, but you can see that if we look in the library, actually that just popped up there, you'll get the plugins load, and this is what the NotePerformer plugin looks like. This is a very simple trio for flute, cello, and piano, so just a very simple mixer. In the library area, you have a whole bunch of things that are related to adapting the sounds in your sound library through the plugin into your written music. And the playback template, wow, where is that? Must be in the play area. Yeah, playback template. So here's the NotePerformer template that's applied here. I could also apply this template, which is draws on the preset, the libraries that come with Dorico. So I thought I would let you hear a bit of this and see. This is sort of like a pitch for for NotePerformer, really. I'll play a little bit of this opening part here. Let's see, hopefully this will sound for you. This is the first sound check. How's the sound level? Can you hear?
Yes.
So that's what NotePerformer sounds like without any tweaking on your part, or it's pretty darn close, pretty nice sound. Now if we switch over to the stock template that it loaded up with initially, I believe was this one. Go to the play tab and check and make sure that it's doing that. Yeah, so now it's in Halion Sonic, which is the plugin that, and you see here in VST MIDI, this is where you take a look at your plugins that are operating in your score. And Halion Sonic, like I say, is the default plugin that is used by Dorico when you buy it. And then the track inspector shows that the cello is associated with HSO cello solo, and it has an expression, probably has an expression map associated with it. So here you can see, and when you click on this gear icon, you see the endpoint set up. So this is another Dorico term that you need to know, is the endpoint, which shows for each plugin what MIDI channel, what setup, what expression map, and if there's percussion, the percussion map for it. And that controls what shows in the mixer down here. So yeah, this is Halion Sonic now, and we can go and see. I'm more curious if you can hear the difference. What do you think about the comparison? Anybody?
Well, I would say, well, first of all, there was a balance, there was an imbalance between the flute and cello that was not present before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I thought that the cello sounded more realistic,
Uh-huh.
but that the piano sounded less realistic. And it was pretty hard to hear the flute at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. You thought the cello was more realistic.
Yes, and I thought that I actually liked the piano better in the second one. But
Huh.
like I agree with you, Jeff, that I couldn't hear the flute. I turned my volume way up.
Uh-huh.
But I think the balance, I think if I had to compare the two, I would prefer the second one.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I found for me the cello sound for NotePerformer is a little richer and more expressive. The piano was to me was about the same, and the flute was more present, more expressive in NotePerformer. So I guess it's a personal preference, and if you wanted, you could mix the two. You know, if you felt you like one instrument better in NotePerformer and another instrument better in Halion, you just go to the play section, and you'd have to, bring in another VST instance for NotePerformer in here. Perhaps create a playback template that includes both of these, and then you could start assigning the instruments as you please, whichever one you like best. So that's the great thing about the way Dorico creates plugins is you have a lot of flexibility in assigning them to individual instruments. Um, Back to Rainy Day, when we look at the Play tab, which is where you do your sound assignments and so forth, we see there's quite a few percussion instruments involved, and each one has Mark Tree. Each one has a contact instance. Oh, now it's still opening my plugin. So it's got a Halion Sonic instance for the marimbas, and a number of different contact instances. So I'm going to minimize all these for the time being, but these are all my different plugins that are contributing to the sounds here. So I guess every time you open a new project, it activates the sound template that you have created for that project. And so now it had to reactivate the sound template that I created for this project. Hopefully it's assigned everything properly. Sometimes I've run into issues where it really is good to get your instrument set up going first and finalized, and because I found if you start moving instruments around, or for example initially in this score I had a sort of a combination of 5-line percussion staves and single lines. And the reason I did that initially is because I could have a lot more individual dynamic expression, and it was easier for me to compose with all of the individual possibilities present. And it turns out the performers don't like that, so I had to reduce that and create another version of the score, which I'll show you later, where I condensed everything into 5-line staves. But the problem with that, which didn't turn out to be such a problem with this piece, is that you can only have one dynamic going at a time for a 5-line percussion staff. They don't have like independent voice playback yet for a percussion 5-line staff, so if you're writing a piano for claves, then everything else is going to be piano until you change that dynamic. And sometimes cymbals get cut off and other things happen. So when I'm
That's good to know. Thanks, Mark.
yeah. So when I'm composing, for percussion, I try to keep things sort of spread out like that at first, especially when I want a lot of individual dynamics. And then later on, it's not that hard to condense it. It took me maybe 2 or 3 hours to condense this whole piece into the 5-line staves. by simply copying and pasting into the 5-line stave and then eliminating the instruments. When I did that, it actually shifted the instrument assignments, and some of them got blanked out. I had to go and redo the instrument assignments. So again, that's why I say it's good, if possible, to have your setup, in the setup tab here, finalized with your, the players and which instruments each player is holding and how they're configured. That's really the first step towards setting up a piece in Dorico. And then if you're going to do custom instrument assignments or custom sound assignments, then you do it after that. So you sort of start, it's good to start with a default template, and accept whatever the sound is there, and maybe that's good enough for you to compose with. And then when it comes time for really fine-tuning and adding other plugins and picking and choosing the best things. For this particular piece, though, to even have a sound that sounded like brake drums, I mean, there is no such thing in the standard instruments that I had. So I had to go looking through all my sound libraries, and I finally ended up, for brake drums, finding, so I named it Balinese brake drums because it's actually to see the instrument involved, you can click on this E here, and it's called kettle gongs. So that's what I ended up using for brake drums, because that was the closest sound I could find. And then if you look at that, it has a whole range of different sounds here. So I played through all those sounds, and I figured, like, which ones am I going to use? I think I chose 5 that were sort of pentatonic-like, and it turned out to be really close, actually, to what he had in his brake drums, which was kind of interesting. But so I choose these, 4 of these notes out of this whole sampled set to use for the brake drums. And like I said, that was after searching through many different libraries that I have here on the left. So as an example of how to set that up, if you go into percussion maps, the library has your expression maps and percussion maps, and you're right at the top are the Balinese brake drums. And here is the setup, the mapping for the notes that I chose, D4, E4, G4, and A4, and the name of the instrument. That's the instrument name that I have in the setup. So if you go, you'll see these names are the same as in the setup in the 5-line staff that I set up there. All using just a natural playback technique, because there's not a whole lot of variety. It's just you hit it with a yarn mallet and that's it. If you have other kinds of techniques you want to use, then you'll have other different kinds of playback techniques that you might map to a different note that's a different sound in that sound set. But in this case, it's pretty simple. So that was really all there was to setting up the brake drums. I chose the 4 pitches and created these 4 mappings. You start with sort of showing all of the notes possible, and you find the notes in here, and you can click this to just show the ones that are in use. So that's it's pretty self-explanatory once you get into this screen how to create new notes. I mean, you just, like I said, you pick a note and you start filling in the fields. Here are the fields down here. What are you going to call it? What's the instrument, and what's the technique? Now in this case, I did have to create a different instrument name for this, so that's also in the library. Instruments. Instrument families. Well, you can see some of the other ones in here that I created for this piece also. The medium, I had 3 gongs in the piece, a medium gong, small gong, and I believe a large gong. I don't see the break drums. Maybe I put them in pitched percussion. Yeah, I'm not sure where they are right now, but this is where, like, if you don't have an instrument definition for the odd percussion instrument you're going to put in there, then you create a new instrument definition in here. And that looks something like this. You know, you'll edit the instrument names. You can specify number of staves, staff lines, and clefs. Pretty basic to define an instrument. And then I just used a default expression map for this. Now the expression map, you don't really, I mean, percussion is not all that, quote, expressive in terms of, you know, different playing techniques, such as, you know, that the strings have with pizzicato and, you know, sul ponte and all of that different stuff. So, you know, it's okay to use just the default one here. Now, and also this particular one doesn't have, the instrument doesn't have the ability to crescendo. And so that's, you know, if you were doing a cymbal and you wanted to do a cymbal roll that you're going to notate in one note, then you might have to go away from the default, or you can redefine the default. But I created a expression map called CC7 Dynamics for the express purpose of, I'll show you that. So this, in the natural playing technique, adds a secondary dynamic. The first volume dynamic in the default is the note velocity, you know, the on velocity of the note. If you write a piano or mezzo forte or whatever, it'll give it that on velocity. The secondary dynamic is, I specified control change 7, which is normally the volume pedal, if you're a synthesizer fan. And you can also specify a minimum volume. So let's say the sample is quite low and you don't want a piano to go down as low as the sample can go. You want to hold it at a particular minimum level because it just sounds better that way. You can control the range of the volume here. So yeah, for those instruments like a cymbal where I would want the ability to crescendo in a roll, then I'll add this special expression map just for that one purpose. Now you can add a lot of more different things to an expression map for an instrument that has the ability to express in different ways. And I'll show you in a moment one of the range stick in this particular piece was like that. I used the expression map for a particular purpose, and I'll show you that. So down here, the range stick, I actually had a range stick sample in my Cineperc library, and it has a lot of different variations of how you can play a range stick in here. Each note is slightly different. So I went through all those variations, and I had to choose a set of those variations that made sense to me, that might make a phrase as if you're going from a slow start into a full torrent and then back into a slow ending. You know, like a range stick, it doesn't just all of a sudden start loud. You know, it sort of trickles in, and then it goes louder and has a full-bodied sound, and then, you know. So I created a number of variations for that. and created first a percussion map. So here, this map has these 6 different varieties of rain stick sound, and I named them in a way that made sense to me. Rain stick full trailing, rain stick trickle shake, soft long, short soft, etc. And assigned a playback technique to them. So playback technique and playing techniques came into play here because I had to create custom ones that didn't come with any playback techniques specific to a rain stick. So I created them, and I was able to use them in this percussion map. So that's another element in the library. Playback techniques will they are a technique for playback. So they're not, there's 2 things: a playing technique, which is the technique that the player uses or that you would notate to produce the sound, and then the playback technique, which is what the specification for how you're going to produce the sound in the system. So playback techniques are pretty simple to define. Let's see, where are... Yeah, here's the rain stick ones that I created. You basically just name it and make it either an attribute or a direction. An attribute is for 1 note, and then it resets. A direction is like arco or bits, where it remains in effect for as many notes until you change the direction. So I made these attributes so that I would need to specify each and every note and what it does. Actually in the playback, it does maintain the last one that you specified. So it's sort of a, to me it's not that big a deal whether it's an attribute or direction, because an attribute seems to act about the same as a direction if you don't specify the next one. Anyway, that's a very simple definition. It's just basically a definition that you can then put into the percussion map to associate this playback technique with that note in the sound library. And then you have the playing techniques, which we have here. These 6 playing techniques. These are a little more, you have a little more to specify here. So first up here in this area, this is the symbol or combination of letters or whatever you're going to use to write into the score to produce that playback technique. So here is where this symbol in the score is tied to this playback technique, rain stick full trailing, that we just looked at. And every time you put an FT above the note, that's the one it's going to use. It's going to use rain stick full trailing playback technique, which is associated with a specific note in the sampling set that I'm using. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, so in creating those, you can specify the text for it. You can make it a text or a glyph. So you can have a symbol that has a number of different symbol libraries you can choose from if you want to try to choose a symbol for it. For me, I felt it was easier to have like a very simple letter abbreviation for it.
Mark, would those be hidden from the performer then? Like this FT, would it be hidden from the performer?
Yeah, right. So if you look at the score, you can see these little violet flags here. Each one of those is one of those techniques. So there's a TT trailing is one of the specifications for the rain stick down here. And down in the bottom here, in the properties panel, you select this properties, and then you see the playing techniques hidden. So that's, if you unhide it, then it pops down above the note here and it's visible. So I kept them visible while I was composing, and then when I went to produce the parts, I hid it.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Right. So that those playing techniques and playback techniques and percussion map is what was used to create the range stick effects. And that one I did use the CC7 dynamics because it's like you're rolling it with one note, one long note, and I might have hairpins on that note to try to make it softer and louder and softer. So I did use the CC7 dynamics where I added that secondary volume control. Okay. One other aspect that was sort of unique to this piece, it was my first experience with the bamboo wind chimes of creating my own sample. So this one, I had nothing in any of my libraries that was approximate to a bamboo wind chimes. And so I created a sample for it, and the sample was really easy. Not the endpoint I want, it's the instrument I want to look at. Right, so this bamboo wind chimes, to create this in Contact was super easy. I mean, first of all, I tried recording the bamboo wind chimes I had bought, and that was good, but I had problems with Digital Performer trying to get the exact sample that I wanted. So I went online and I bought a sample for like $2.50 off of this website, and it was a really nice sample. And I took it and just dragged it from my file explorer onto this instrument, and boom, it laid it all out, did everything automatically for me, and there I just from one sample I had a whole range of, and
Hey, darn.
pitch, like the actual real pitch is right there. Now if I wanted a giant bamboo wind chimes in my piece, or I want a really tinkly one. I don't think I want a really tinkly one, but I love the low one.
Right.
Yeah, all of that from one sample that I dragged right onto here, and boom, it was ready for me to start using it. So something that I thought was going to be difficult, and used to be quite difficult with in my sampling. I have, hardware samplers over here in my rack, and boy, creating a sample like that from there it took an hour. It just took 3 seconds dragging the sample onto here. So I have to say that I'm becoming a convert from my hardware racks, which I've loved in past years, to just using my computer now. I was resistant for a long time, but that time is probably over. So
On this website, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but this website, presumably somebody started with a hardware sample and did things with it.
Yeah, they had, so this site, and I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. I'd have to look in my...
That's all right. I'm just speaking generic.
Yeah, they had a lot of variety of samples to choose from. I could choose from about 5 or 6 different bamboo wind chimes samples of varying costs, from like $2.50 on up to $6 for each one, which I felt was pretty reasonable. They were just one sample, they weren't like treated or spread around. It was just a good recording, good clean recording. So
Right.
too, to go online and purchase really inexpensively a sound and put it into your digital sampler in your computer if you have one. That's one of the things I love about this full version of Contact that I got with the Native Instruments bundle, is that it's a really full-featured sampler. It can do a lot of things very easily. I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of it yet. So let's see, what else to talk about? Did you guys have any particular questions or, concern?
I actually do have one question. You put so much emphasis on making sure that you had your instruments set up in advance perhaps of starting to create the score. My question is, what if you get halfway through a piece and you really decide you need to add another instrument to it? Is that going to be a real major undertaking at that point?
I don't think so. I think my problem was rearranging the same instruments that I already had into a different configuration, like collapsing the single line percussion into the 5 lines. And let me open that one and I'll show you what it did to my setup. It's kind of like weird. It expanded the setup significantly, and I'm not exactly sure why. Okay, so we'll open up the performance score. That gets into some other things about, how to use cymbals for percussion and so forth. Different note heads, which became a necessity once I collapsed everything into the 5 lines. The players wanted different note heads for different instruments. So here it's probably still loading. It should start popping up any second. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this one had more instances of Contact than the other one, some of them being duplicate, and it left. Now I've since reassigned the instruments that were left without a sound, but a couple of the instruments, when I had experimented with trying to use this for playback, which I still use the other one for playback because to me that's the more accurate playback. This one is really for performance. But anyway, a couple of them were not assigned and I had to go in and reassign them again. I don't actually recall now which ones it was, but now I have these different instances where not the break drums, maybe it was the gongs. Yeah, the gongs are now on different contacts. I think I actually cleaned this up a bit since it happened. But it proliferated the number of instances of the plugins, and like I said, 2 of the instruments no longer were assigned. It didn't take me long, 15-20 minutes to fix it up. It ended up being a little more complex setup, but as long as it was sounding right, I decided that's okay. So I really don't, maybe I emphasize that too much. I don't really think it's a big deal to add an instrument, especially if it's a new instrument that hasn't been assigned anything yet. And if you're doing something with just the default template, then it's just going to assign it, automatically, and you won't even have to do anything. So in my case, most of my pieces so far have either been NotePerformer, which just works, I assign a new instrument and it's working, or it's been a custom setup with using my different sound libraries, and then I really do have to go in and look around and figure out which sound to use and create a mapping if I need to, and so on. So that becomes some work, but no more work than you had initially, really. So I think I probably misstated the importance of that. It really was more about consolidating staves or switching an existing instrument that has music to a different player or things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So here's what this one, by the way, I find this really handy that you can look at the mixer at the bottom here while you're composing and listening, playing back. You have a number of different options for what appears in this bottom panel. You have the properties, a keyboard if you want to use that for note input. You have some special guitar related stuff which I don't use, drum pads, and the mixer. So I find the mixer and the properties I use very often. And the mixer, you can adjust things here. It's just as good as having a separate window here. I find it easier to, I'm finding a place to play that has those particular instruments that I want to balance, and so I can go to that particular place, start playing, and then adjust the balance here. And as you can see, the balance has been, adjusted quite a bit for some of the things. Cymbal was particularly loud. I had to tone it way down. Now there's a couple of, I guess an interesting thing here is this custom cymbal I created for the mark tree, which unfortunately was not part of the performance. That was like one of the disappointing parts of the performance for me, is that they didn't have a mark tree in their setup, and they didn't notify me of that, or else I would have brought one. But anyway, I created this symbol because I wanted to indicate both a downstroke and an upstroke on the mark tree, since it goes, as a pitch sequence that goes from low to high or high to low, and that made a difference to me, so I wanted to notate it. But there wasn't, of course, anything in the playing techniques for that, so I created a playback technique and a playing technique for that. And in the playing technique, I actually this was a little complicated, so I'll look at that for a moment. Playing technique for mark tree, gliss down. Here we go. And here's the gliss up. So how did I create this? I asked my artist wife to use her iPad, where she has a graphics program, and she created this squiggle arrow thing for me. I told her what I wanted and sort of like drew it out a little bit, and then she created it in Procreate on her iPad, saved it as a PNG file, and then you can import the PNG file into here. So you can create your own custom symbols, and you could do that in Microsoft Paint if you wanted to. I tried to do it in Paint, but it was so difficult to control with the mouse that I couldn't do it, very well. So I went
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, any PNG file or JPEG can become a symbol in your score that way, which I think is kind of cool. Yeah, so here again I associated with a playback technique of glissando down, and had that playback technique associated in the percussion map. Mark tree, glissando up and glissando down are the playback techniques associated with these specific notes in the sound set. So again, percussion maps, really important. Okay, so that's that special symbol. As you can see, I have different note heads for bamboo wind chimes and mark tree, all the stuff that's appearing at the top of the staff that's differentiated. The symbol is a sort of an open X note head that I took their default one and modified it to try to make the half notes look bigger, but anyway, I wasn't too successful at that. But you can take an existing symbol and start modifying it and try to get it to look better. And then you assign those note heads. Where did I do that? You can assign them in a couple of different ways. You can assign them in the percussion kit. edit note heads. Oh, you have to choose a yeah, so this is the default note head that I chose for that, large arrow up note heads. And the bamboo wind chimes, large X and diamond note heads. So you can browse through these and see what they look like, and then assign them here in this override percussion note heads dialog that you get by selecting an instrument in the percussion kit and clicking edit note heads. Right, so any questions about that part of things?
Yeah, I don't have enough experience to know what to ask, but I'm hoping to. I'm just trying to get familiar as a lot of this.
Mm-hmm. Now, some of the sounds in here were reused from other pieces that I did. I did a piece for Sonata for piano and percussion where I did a fair amount of work configuring instruments, and I had a suspended cymbal. Really, it's a sizzle cymbal, but didn't really end up getting a great sizzle cymbal sound. I still kind of wish I could have sampled one, but some of the instruments that I have in here were existing from other scores, and to do that you have to make sure to export. So in your library, let's say I wanted to use the bamboo wind chimes in a future piece. It's a special one that I did here. I want to save that percussion map. I click export library, and I have to navigate to the place where I'm saving them, which I can't remember where that is right now. It's not here, that's for sure. I don't think it was components. Anyway, yeah, so you would navigate there and then save it, and then later you can go and import library. And I wish it remembered where it was, but it doesn't. You have to remember yourself which folder you saved them to, and you can grab it out of that folder once it's been exported from the place where you created it. Otherwise, you're just starting from new every time you create a piece, because it comes with its default set of templates and so on and so forth, but there's no real, I mean, it comes with some default percussion maps for the default libraries that it has, but if you're doing anything with your own libraries or customized sounds, then you're going to need to create it new unless you've exported it like that, saved it in a file location, and then you can import it into your next piece. So that's important to know. I didn't know that for a while, and I had to go back and export the stuff that I did before to make sure I didn't have to do it over again here. Okay, let's see, what else did I have on my list? Yeah, there's some trickiness to balancing and mixing when you start using these VSTs. So you have two places where you can do that. One is obviously in the Dorico mixer, and the other, let's say, which one did I? It was 05. Where I have wind chimes. It was the one where I have shakers. Anyway, in each contact instance, there's also a mixer, and the mixer can act in a variety of different ways. What I've generally chosen to do is I set up the instruments that are going to be in that instance, And then I say in batch functions, clear output section and create one individual channel for each loaded instrument. So unless I do that and make sure that there's a separate channel here for each of these instruments, otherwise they're going to be ganged up in one mixer channel in Dorico. So I want to make sure I always have individual playback channels for each of my sampled instruments. And I ran across this one case where, oddly enough, it kept resetting to having both instruments in the first channel. And I had to go back and do this batch function every time I opened up the score. If I wanted accurate playback, I had to go and do this clear output section and create one individual channel because it kept resetting itself. That was rather odd. But anyway, it fixed it as soon as I did reset it. So yeah, that means that you have the option of configuring the basic volume of the sound in the VST instance, and then at least in Contact. So this is really specific to Contact as opposed to other types of VSTs that you might be able to employ. And you can do actually quite a bit of mixing right in that Contact instance. You can add reverb, you can do EQ, really a pretty full slate of mixing tools there. I tend to just adjust the volume there initially, and then I'll adjust it further in the Dorico mixer here. And of course the Dorico mixer is where I'll assign stereo field. And also, of course, where I do mute or solo if I want to do those kinds of things when I'm examining individual sounds. Yeah, so I wanted to cover a little bit about mixing because it gets a little more complex once you start adding a full-featured VST that has its own mixer in there. It took me a while to get used to that. Now that covers about most of the things I wanted to cover in VSTs. I could go and do, show you more about Dorico if you want, or go through the different major tabs here if you're not familiar with them. Any requests about that? What you'd like to do further?
I'm not even sure I know it enough to know what to ask.
Uh-huh.
So,
Okay.
I found, so I'm a little bit used to Contact instances from Sibelius. They used that also. I think not as completely or as comprehensively as Dorico does.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not completely unfamiliar to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's been good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, maybe I'll go through and just do a brief review of the major tabs here and how they each operate and when I use them. So the Setup tab is, of course, where you set up your score. And you have, over here you decide what your players are. Of course, you can start with a standard ensemble. They have, various presets. If you're just doing a string quartet, you can choose that score format right when you create it, and it'll set up the instruments for you. In this case, of course, there's no preset for two percussionists. So I just created the whole thing from scratch, and
Right.
in the other one it was more complex than this. Here it's just marimba and the percussion kit. This is after I consolidated everything down into the 5-line kit. And then over here you have your layouts. And one of the great things about Dorico is the ability to fine-tune your layouts, the full score and the parts, and create subsidiary layouts. If you want like a piano reduction, if you're doing a choir piece and you want to do a piano reduction for the pianist, and it's pretty easy to do that, amazingly enough. I haven't done it yet, but
That's good to know.
yeah. or you want to collapse some of the instruments together. And in this case, for this performance score, I did, let's see, the layouts. On and marimba. I thought I had layouts that had the individual instruments as well. Maybe those were just temporary and I deleted them, but like here, they're playing so often that I find it really didn't suit to put cues in there, because the largest number of rests was like 2 or 3, 4 at the most, and the cues were not really rhythmic, and so it made more sense for them to be able to cut and paste their parts, basically. So that's what they did, is they printed these and they cut and paste them. I think I gave them parts that had only their part, and I also gave them this part that has both of them in it, and left it up to them. Apparently, the guy was going to cut up and use some of the individual parts and some of the both parts as sort of a cue mechanism. I don't know what they ended up using in the end, and she used an iPad, so I assume she probably just used this particular version where it has both parts on it. But you know, I could make that part with just percussion 2 in it, and this other part with both percussionists in it, and that's totally easy. And then you have the ability to tweak the layout in layout options. Tons of different ways to tweak the layout. What do you want? Bars number, where the bar numbers are going to appear, and all kinds of different things about that. How to handle repeats in the bar numbers, the appearance of the bar numbers, showing and hiding them. Same for brackets and braces. What do you want? No brackets, orchestral style, small ensemble style, blah, 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 blah. It's like so many options. Chord symbols and diagrams, not something I use much, but you know, for the pop musicians, it has a lot of different aspects of the chord symbols.
I have my druthers about the chord symbols.
Yeah.
They allow you all those options, but they still manage not to provide some options that you're used to. But it's par for the course, really.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I got a question. Which version are you on now?
I'm still on 5. I haven't gone to 6 yet.
You haven't looked at it. That's what I was going to ask, is if you had looked at 6 yet.
Yeah, I just got the notices about version 6 about a week ago, and I'm planning to upgrade for my birthday. So,
That sounds good.
yeah. Um, yeah, so I guess you probably write some jazz scores, Ted, huh? So yeah, that's why you would use the chord symbols?
That's since I've gotten Dorico, that's mostly what I've been doing, or piano scores. So not a lot of what you've been getting into, although I really look forward to it. It's a
Uh-huh.
great to look at this stuff. Yeah, it's funny. The other thing I was thinking of, which is so not, the probably the composing that you're all thinking of, is if you've got a lead sheet, or even if you've got something where some people are just comping. I haven't tried to get that into the playback, but you should be able to get, like, say, a swing pattern on the drums. So you don't want to write it out, but it would be beneficial to have it played in there. Um, I don't know if you would have had a use to mess with any of that.
I haven't messed with that, but I think I read somewhere that it's possible. Looking in Play to see if there's anything about that. Or maybe it's in Preferences.
You would want to. I mean, you put the slashes in the score, and they do make that really really easily.
Yeah.
easily done.
But it doesn't play back the repeat?
Well, I mean, if you just put the slashes in, all that's doing is that's the visual to say that, you're playing the changes there. But what you would want is on the recording, is you would want to bring, um, I'm thinking that would come in on the drum. It would have to come in on the VST, wouldn't it actually? Because you'd have to have like a drum kit program
Possibly.
that would have some presets.
Like Dorico had some, I mean, not Dorico, Sibelius had some settings to add swing to eighth note rhythms.
Sure.
And I'm not seeing it in here at this point, and I haven't had need to play with it.
Yeah. No, I was just curious.
Uh-huh. It should have something like that.
Here's another one while I'm thinking of it. Let's see, and this was a piano thing. A trill that changes speed.
Hmm.
Now, I was able to get it with the it's the properties that you expand on the bottom. I was able to get it to perform the trill. But I couldn't get it to notate it, aside from just putting text in there.
Now, doesn't it have? I thought it had the kind of spreading beaming, spread beams where it goes from one beam to 3 or 4 beams. Is that what you're talking about in terms
Well, you
of-
can do the tremolo would be one way to do it instead of a trill. But I don't think that would actually that I think is the way I was going for. But what you want is a diagonal beaming, right? So that you're noting the change in velocity.
Right, and I believe that's available, but I haven't had to use it yet. That is something I do use occasionally, but I haven't found where it is yet.
Yeah. The other day I couldn't find it anywhere. I gave up, but I feel like it ought to be in there somewhere.
I'm pretty sure it is in there. I've seen, I looked
Okay.
at a support thread about it, and it's, seemed to be available.
If anybody finds it, I'm curious to see the answer. I could go back and touch
Yeah.
my score up.
Huh. Well, yeah, that's something to research. I don't know the answer to that one.
It is nice. You can certainly, with as long as you can do with Sibelius, you can Google and their documentation I find is more helpful than I remember Sibelius as being.
Yeah, it definitely the manual's more complete, and then
Yeah,
whenever I have a problem, I go to the support chats, and
right. And those are
there's a
generally
tremendous
pretty good.
amount of information there. So usually there's something that addresses the problem, and if not, I just create my own thread, and within hours, I get an answer from all of these avid, Dorico enthusiasts that know everything. So that's
Oh, I didn't think to create my own thread. I usually back off on that. I should go do that.
Oh yeah, it's totally easy, and you get you get a response within hours to your email. It's quite nice. I mean, I relied on that many times during my Sonata for piano and percussion, where I hit so many different hurdles,
Hmm.
and it got me through all of them.
You're talking about the documentation. Can you get, I mean, is this horribly old-fashioned? Can you get an actual book that you can hold in your hand with the documentation, or is it only going to be online?
Book?
So I have a PDF, and let's see, how long is it? It's like 1,500 pages or something like that. So I don't even think you'd want a booklet. It's
Well, I tell you, the way I learned Sibelius was, you could get a book back then, and I just sat down with it and I started reading through it. And after I'd read about the first, I don't know, 300-400 pages or so, 300 pages, I had a pretty good education of what it could do.
yeah.
And it's a little intimidating for me to just kind of jump in and start doing stuff. I would like to thumb through something, and that's harder to do or it can be harder to do with something that's only online. So you guys aren't aware of any hard copy books you can get.
It is a good point. It's nice to be able to look at a book and flip through it. I guess I'm pretty used to with Dorico. If I want to know how to do something, I'll Google it and it'll usually bring up the documentation first. And if not, I'll
Right.
go to the thread. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, if you're
It's
looking
a
for something specific, yeah, but it's
yeah,
just if you're trying to learn it, especially, I mean, the Sibelius documentation was so well organized, they would put the stuff you needed to know first, right at the
right,
beginning, and then
right.
and it was very well laid out that way, and it was very helpful. But that's all right. I'll figure it out.
And this PDF is well laid out. As you can see, it's 1,944 pages long, so you'd have to
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
you have to waste 4 reams of paper if you wanted to print it. It would be like this tall.
No, no, I wouldn't want to deal with binding it.
Um, but it's huge, and it has this incredible index in it where you look up anything and it's pretty much in the index somewhere. I have
Right.
found things that I couldn't answer in the documentation. And then, of course, they have their table of contents where you can look through the design, introduce your concepts and the user interface and project, and it's pretty well organized.
Right, right.
You can click on any of these and go right to the topic, and so it's pretty nicely documented.
Yeah, once you're on the trail of something, it's it's easier to click on a link on a screen, for sure.
Jeff, this isn't what you're looking for. I'm just trying to think of alternatives, but there's certainly YouTubes where people kind of walk through
I hate
going
it.
through.
Don't
What's that?
even go there.
Okay, all right. I'm trying to be
Don't- I
creative
don't
here.
I don't watch videos to learn stuff. I read to learn stuff.
Yeah, no, I
If
get
I
you.
have any choice at all, I can
Yeah.
always do it, 3 times faster reading.
No, no. If I go through a video, sometimes if they're well indexed, you can go right to the spot that has the thing. But that's, I mean, the way I want to do it. I think this is a little bit what Mark was referencing earlier. Is it's like I want a problem to solve, and then I go figure out
Yeah,
the things I need to
yeah,
do.
yeah, for sure.
And Jeff, you might want to consider getting a Kindle. You could look at it on a Kindle, and uh,
Yeah, that's a point.
so okay, so the setup, that's where you configure the different versions of the score that you want to look at, and you can switch between them here and look at whichever version you want and write things in it. And of course, it's fully interactive with the full score. And I think
And,
that yeah.
and it looks like they have different paper colors, just like Sibelius.
Yeah, they have different paper colors you can choose.
Yeah.
And
Desk backgrounds. I always like the fake wood.
the thing that's really different about Dorico is the separation of the write and engrave functions.
Mhm.
And this, I don't know. I'm sort of like on the fence about this, but
Uh,
like if you're writing and you hit a dynamic on something and it goes in a place that bothers you, you've got to change over to the engrave section to move it into the place that looks okay to you. And most people recommend that you wait until you've written everything to go to engrave and start adjusting. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. It's like if I have a hairpin sitting down here and another one up here, I'm like, it bothers me every time I look at it. So,
yeah, I hear you.
so, but that said, it's easy to go back and forth. And I guess they are able to do a lot more in the engrave area by separating it out from the write. And you have these 4 basic things. When it's on this graphic editing, that's when you can move stuff around. You select an element and use a keyboard shortcut to move it around, down, up, etc.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
mean, some of this stuff looks like, I mean, this almost looks something like something lifted right out of a Sibelius menu.
Uh-huh. And then
For
you
what
have,
it's worth, it's Command 2. It's like setup Command 1, write Command 2, engrave Command 3. So you can switch back with shortcut keys between those
yeah,
modes.
Oh, that's a good thing.
yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of shortcut keys that you can use once you get used to it.
Yeah, I do get it's a little annoying, like I'll be on engrave and selecting and dealing with things there, and then I just want to fix a note, and it's like, oh yeah, I have to go back to write to do it again. I
Yeah.
suppose it's not that big a deal in the scheme
The
of
other
things.
shortcut is you can just double click anywhere in here and go back to right.
Huh.
I'm a mouse person more or less, and
Oh, I see. Oh, I love to avoid the mouse whenever I can.
yeah, I know that's different with me because I'm
Yeah.
kind of meticulous, and I've already handwritten out, stuff on a piece of paper, phrases that I'm going to input, and I haven't yet gotten smooth with like keyboard input for it. Although I'm a keyboard player, I mean I could do that, but when I'm composing, I'm thinking rather slowly and
Yeah.
like
Well,
keeping a note in
it,
sequence.
it was funny, the last session that we did here, I was surprised. I guess it's just like I like to compose on my notational program just from the computer keyboard because then I can take my laptop anywhere and I don't have a lot of peripheral setup. So I one of the things I really love about Dorico is the shortcut keys for note input
Hmm.
allow you to input music really quickly.
Yeah.
They're really nicely laid out. The Sibelius shortcuts were the complete obvious opposite. They were just tedious.
Yes, I would agree. And some of them don't, they don't really make sense with the keys they're assigned to. And in
No.
Sibelius, you had the function keys. I'm on a PC, so not a Mac, but in a PC, the function keys were all laid out, and I could put still have my little Sibelius strip uh,
Yeah.
above the function keys telling me which is which, and it was
Uh-huh.
really easy. Yeah. So
Cool.
that's a little more, yeah, I don't know, but I still feel like I like the added finesse, and I feel like my scores look a little better in here, and that it's easier to produce the parts, and especially with orchestra scores, if you're going to combine players into a staff and so forth. In Sibelius, I found myself having to create like 3 different scores for each piece.
Hmm.
One for playability, performance, for the playback,
Yeah.
another one for the master score, for the conductor's score, and then another one for the parts.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
whoa, keeping those in sync was such a headache. And I'm, and now here I had to create 2 scores for Rainy Day. So I didn't completely escape that because I still found it nicer to compose with the single line version, um, with all the
Hmm.
instruments spread out. Um, but it was easy to condense it, I have to say. It only took me about 2 hours or so for the whole score to transform it from the single line into the 2 percussion kits.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Can I ask one other while I'm thinking about it? How do you deal with flows? I mean, it seems to me that that always maybe it's just kind of an annoyance that it gives you. Do you find it to be so?
Not really. So this is a one flow kind of a piece, but in the one that I just started now has four. It's a 4 movement piece, so I have 4 flows in it, and I kind of like the idea that you can work in each movement independently and immediately go back and forth between them. Yeah, so
Do you?
here I have, 4 movements, 4 flows,
Yeah,
and
gotcha. Do you save templates for the various situations? It seems to me flow works great if you're doing movements, but
mhm.
if you're not doing movements, You just got to take it all out.
It's kind of, yeah, the flow is kind of irrelevant for a single movement piece in my mind. So
Yeah, it's extra baggage at that point.
yeah, yeah, and I mean you can pretty much ignore it. Um, you don't have to have flow titles in there if you don't want to.
Well, it puts another, flow one indicator in the header of every page, um, and at the top. It's a tedious thing. You just have to take it out, or you have to get a template set up for it,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that's
and
true.
you have to monkey with the setup, with the page setup.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and the other thing about flow headings, at least in version 5, they seem kind of funky. Like you start adding stuff in the middle and inserting measures, and all of a sudden you've got a flow heading on the last page of the flow as well as the first page.
Yeah,
And, you got to mess around with that. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of a bug. But I like being able to switch back and forth and, work in multiple movements. I've, created sort of the sketches of the beginning of each of these movements, and so I can whatever idea occurs to me that day, I can just go right there and start working on that, add an idea in, fine tune this or whatever. So for me, it makes sense. For most of my pieces, I'm more of a multi-movement composer, and I've had to move more towards single, shorter movements because of performance considerations, basically. In order to get something performed, it's got to be under 10 minutes, and single. With my style of structure, it takes a while to for a movement to run its course, and
Hmm.
so it's I've now Rainy Day, and then this other piece I did, Elegy, that's going to be performed in by the horn quartet, where the first single movement pieces I've done in a while. Um, I just am like a multi-movement guy. I love playing with form and having form in the sequence of movements as well.
Yeah, no, I know, I totally got it. Yeah, I get, and the flow is work really well for when you're doing multi-movement.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you feel like showing your horn piece?
Sure, I could do that. This is a NotePerformer piece, and like a lot of the standard setups, I like NotePerformer enough, especially with brass, that I'm just happy with that, and I'll work with that. So 4 horns. You want to hear a little bit of it?
Sure.
Sure.
Oh, there's a sound. Right, that's about halfway.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know why I should have thought of it, but I got a couple of questions because you guys are both longtime Dorico users and maybe can give me a little idea what I'm getting into. Um, so do you find that you write, so you guys both write, I mean, Ted, I know you write a fair amount of piano music and sounds like you do too, Mark. So do you find you do a lot of cross-staff beaming?
Hmm. I was doing cross-staff notes a bit, but
Well,
no, not the beaming. Well, no, Mark.
I mean, if you do cross-staff notes, you're typically doing, yeah, cross-staff, I guess, is what I mean. I'm just wondering how that works for you because, Sibelius had like a whole library of bugs. I could probably give an entire presentation on the bugs in cross-staff notation in Sibelius, and they never fixed them. Version after
Yeah.
version after version, they never fixed any of them.
Hmm. I know that Dorico can do that pretty well, and I'm trying to remember if I had any in my Sonata for piano and percussion.
Yeah, I'm looking up the score right now to see.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like a really classic one. Oh, well, a really classic one is accidentals. If you have, if you have a music with a lot of accidentals and you push a bunch of notes across the staff, then you have to then the cautionaries and everything are never right. You have to there's accidentals missing that you have to add. There's others that you have to hide because they don't belong there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, I think Dorico is going to be more satisfying. I'm just looking at the score I was thinking of, and I've got cross beaming. I don't even think about it anymore because
Well,
there's
that's a good sign.
yeah, there's a one key shortcut command. And now that you're saying this, I vaguely remember a frustration in Sibelius. So if I've got a note in the treble clef, but like in this case, I want it to be picked up by the left hand, there's a one key shortcut, N or M, depending on which way you're going.
Right.
Plants it in the other staff, cross beams it, and enough done, enough said. And I don't think there's any issue with the accidentals being done. I don't remember that being an issue in Sibelius.
Yeah.
I was going to show you, like in the flow layouts, flow notation options here, you have a whole section on accidentals and how you want to treat them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, it goes on. And on,
Well, this was in Sibelius. You had a specific problem that it would kind of lose its mind to some degree on the notes that got pushed to the other staff.
Yep, I feel like I remember that now. The nightmares are coming back.
Yeah, and there's there was just a whole host of stuff. The other thing I was curious about is something that I have always wanted in Sibelius is something where somehow where you did not have to rely on your ears to determine if the dynamics were working properly. That if there was something where you could look at to see what Sibelius thinks it's doing with the dynamics. And because you put in those dynamic symbols and sometimes and how you've set it up, it might apply depending on where you've placed it in between, especially in piano. It might apply to the other staff or not, and then depending on the order they come in, it might supersede the one you had before, or it might not. And if there was some indication, like it will give you an indication of how fast it thinks it's going, on a playback. It would be great if it had an indication of how loud it thinks it is.
You can in Dorico, for just playback purposes, I don't know if Mark, you have something to demo there, but on that properties section below, I think it was,
Oh,
you can control the dynamic. And I also found it was nice to do that in Dorico for the retardandos. You could control the performance of the retardando, um, I believe using the properties.
hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't experimented with that. So,
Yeah, if you just like, I don't know, we could put one in, and then you just go to the properties, and it basically will ask you how quickly you want it to go. And then the thing in Sibelius he had to do is he had to do the end tempo um,
uh-huh.
after that. And so if you wanted really the your retardando to come out right, you would have to, well, again, you'd have to create a separate score for your
Um,
back.
well, you can in the line you could determine the percentage of tempo change for a specific line.
Okay. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. So maybe
Yeah.
Sibelius isn't as bad as I'm remembering, but I remember looking at this in Dorico. The Trill was another one that I was thinking of a minute ago, where you
Uh,
could control that. Yeah, it's possible Sibelius got better, or I'm remembering wrong. But you were also saying like where you put the dynamic, you had to get it exactly right to get it to catch the notes properly. Is that what you were saying?
sometimes, yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
It can be tricky. You have, in fact, I found that I found, they always talked about their magnetic placement. That they had this stuff so it would automatically, stuff would, stuff that was placed close to each other would be automatically distributed in a readable way.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that that came in handy with keeping dynamics from treading on notes that it shouldn't, because I could put the actual dynamic like way up in the middle of the staff, but the magnetic placement, so I could put the actual dynamic up in the middle of the staff so it would not affect the other one, but the
Mm-hmm.
magnetic placement would cause it to appear to be down between them where you could read it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I always
Was
had to hide the real one, and show the performance one
Yeah,
Right.
right on
yeah,
top of one another, and it made it
Yeah.
difficult to choose. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I should probably move on here.
Yeah. I haven't been able to find any examples of what we're talking about in this score, so I did find a trill where you can, adjust the speed and the properties and, whether it starts on the upper note or not and, what the
Yep.
interval is and all of that. So you have
Eh,
a lot of control over trills.
Yep. It does say slow trill speed there. Um, although that might be a reference to the lower part, but yeah, yeah. So there's stuff you can play with.
Yeah, so maybe that's about it for tonight.
Okay, well, Mark, thank you very much. I didn't understand everything I saw, but it was all vaguely familiar,
Hmm.
and I think it'll be helpful to me, as I get into this.
Okay,
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
you're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Kevin, he woke up.
Oh, I've been here. Just sort of floating along here. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Uh, I guess that's it. I'll I'll stop the recording.